I love dragons and death, cause they are fun. Okay, so chapter 3, there's two things right off the bat I want to say about chapter 3. One, there is a massive info dump of stuff, which is going to lead me to introduce you to Professor Tory. And whenever I go into lore or whatever, I'm going to put on the glasses. So that's like world building and lore. Professor of world building and lore. World renowned. Also, there was so much I didn't want to keep re-listening. I re-listened to it twice. And then I was losing, like, you know, my emotions that I was feeling going through. Because the other part is this is a very challenging chapter. It is intentionally made to make you feel very uncomfortable, and it does. Okay, so first off, let's info dump. I got my lore glasses on and everything. Professor Tory. All right. There's a lot of geography, and I wish I remembered all of it, but apparently, like, okay, there's two separate continents, and Westeros, where we've been, you know, like with the Starks and everything, it has like 7 kingdoms, of which I remember a couple of places, and I'll tell you, like, Dragonstone is there someplace. There's the Faceless Isles. I remember there was Casterly Rock, and you know they mentioned the area where Lysa goes, Catelyn's sister, Ned Stark's wife. They mentioned King's Landing, which I'm assuming is like the main. That's where the Iron Throne actually is. And the Vale. I remember the Vale. And then there's a narrow sea. And on this other thing, instead of the 7 kingdoms, they have the free cities. And I guess there's like 9 of them. And I don't remember a lot of those either. Like, it was a lot of just info, just boom, boom, boom. And there's history lessons. I'll do a history lesson after this. Okay, so there's definitely a place called Bravos that's in there. It's more like I get from the descriptions, like Westeros is a lot more like green and you know, kind of foresty and like Blue Mountain type, you know, and then like the free cities and all of that across the narrow sea is kind of more like desert, you know, or like tropical. I might be wrong, but yeah, there's like Bravos. The most of the story takes place in a place Pentos, you know. There's a place called Dothrak that I think is mostly desert and stuff, and but like there are a lot more like merchanty, Middle Eastern kind of vibe. I think like you know, kind of like Africa, India, that kind of thing. There's one mention of a guy with like black onyx skin, and they say he's from the Summer Isles. So I'm guessing, you know, that's more like an African climate, but that's just me racially profiling one random lord. So if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Don't cancel me. Like, I'm trying to think as a geologist, like sun exposure, skin darkness. That's all I meant by that. Okay. Anyway, so a couple of history lessons. They hid some background lore and some stuff, and I'm getting this out before I get to the plot. So if you want to just go through the plot with me, wait till I take the glasses off. Just, you know, kind of skim. And pretty much from here on, if I'm explaining the world or social studies or like how it goes or whatever, or like I don't know, like Dothrakian math or whatever, I'm gonna have the glasses on. If not, then, you know, we're talking about the story and how I experienced it. So, what I gathered through like stories and stuff, and this is dubious, so I don't know how canon it is, but it's one character telling another character. I guess there was a king that a bunch of people didn't like, and from this side of the story, the Starks and the Lannisters are seen as the usurper's dogs, and I'm guessing our boy King Bobby is the usurper, and they sacked King's Landing and killed the Targaryen king. While that was going on, there was this dude Rhaegar, and I think he was a brother to the king. I'm not sure. Don't come for me. But his only heir, so maybe it was King Rhaegar or whatever, just got born by this Dorne-ish lady. Oh, there's Dorne as well as another one of the kingdoms. But this Dornish lady, Ilya, gave birth to the heir, and they killed the baby, right? And then there's two other kids, who was like the son of the king that just got killed in King's Landing, and that is Viserys and Daenerys, right? They call her Dany in the book, so I'm gonna just say Dany because it's easier. But I guess at Dragonstone, while all the battles were going, they like scuttled most of their ships while they were still in port and stuff. Like they were just wrecking people all over. And during this, there's this dude Sir William, right? And he manages to grab the kids, because it's Dany and her brother Viserys is like 8 years older, and he grabs them and he takes them across the narrow sea to Bravos and stuff. And we're gonna get to the plots for a little bit, but he basically apparently like he's really mean to the servants and stuff, but he's pretty nice to the kids, like especially Dany, stuff like he calls her little princess, and like there's a nice sized house and she has her own room, and like she's remembering like, oh, there was a nice lemon tree and stuff. And that's where they grow up a little bit. And then he dies and the servants take all the money, so they're kind of on the lam, and they go through all these places that I'm never gonna remember. But it's like they start traveling from like Myrrh to Tyrannos, maybe, and like through a bunch. But they end up in see, now I'm like, is it Pontos or Platos? We're just gonna go with Pontos. If that's wrong, I'm very sorry and stuff. But that's where this chapter opens, is after they're running through and stuff. Because I guess at first when the king at first died, everybody's like, oh yeah, it's the king's kids, come on in, and then after like some time, they're like, like y'all ain't making a comeback. So like people started getting rougher and rougher, and then we jump to this. Now I'm going to warn you, I had a hard time with this chapter, and especially like having to listen to it multiple times because of the info dump. Daenerys in this is 13 years old, and that is historically accurate. I'm not judging, like that's how it would go down, but they sexualize, because they're trying to basically pretty her up and stuff. And there are some rough scenes, okay? Like he's like giving her we'll go through it, but for the sake of sanity and hotness, just in my head, I acknowledged that Daenerys is like a little girl and it's rough and it's supposed to be uncomfortable, but yeah, for sanity and hotness, I just went ahead and stunt doubled her for Amelia Clark. And I was like, it doesn't have to make sense. Anyway, so if Amelia Clark's out there, thank you for that. And sorry, I don't know. But anyway, respectfully. Anyway, so we open and he's showing her like okay, but they got to Platos, and apparently they hooked up with like this really skeevy kind of smuggler merchant guy who he's basically like, he's really rich, but he's like doing back channels, selling like dragon bones and questionable stuff. And he's just this big fat blonde guy. Like, they describe him as massive, like belly jiggles and stuff, you know, like his belly don't jiggle, it folds, you know. So there's that, and it's a weird dynamic because her brother, oh, if I ever wish someone would just get kicked in the head by a horse, like in one person, okay, because Viserys is completely delusional. Like, he is the poster boy for believing your own hype, right? And he's like, this is our land. He refers to himself as the dragon. He refers to pissing him off as waking the dragon. Meanwhile, he borrowed a sword. He's never used it. This guy's never fought. And basically, his main source of feeling powerful is abusing his little sister. Like, you know, and he goes on like little rages and like delusions and flights of fancy. And half the reason they're running is because he's like, oh, the kings are sending, you know, hidden blades after me all the time because I'm so important. And he's basically just trying to feed his own ego and pretend he's like some badass or something, or important, or, you know, even worth mention. And whenever it doesn't happen, he takes it out on like his sister and stuff, and in really rough ways as well, like, because it mentions he's hurt her and stuff, and in the scene he's constantly breaking her down and like doing stuff to like inflict pain and warning her not to tick him off. Like, he's straight up abusive and like little power hungry. And see, this guy, I had his name. It's like Iliaro, or whatever. He's a magister as well, you know. And they say he's like real connected, even in like the iffy places. Oh, they mention like some mysterious land by the Jade Sea and stuff. That's another place I remembered. But he plays into her brother's delusions, like Viserys and stuff. And he's the whole time he's like, you know, fake smile. He's got the greasy beard and all the jangly, you know, like jewelry, and he's wearing like silk robes and stuff, just silk hat on a pig, literally. And he's like, oh yeah, you're so important and all this, right? And it opens with him showing like a super nice, super silky dress that he's giving to Daenerys, right? And Dany is out here like, okay, this is sus. Why is this guy being so nice to us? Because they've been living there for like a year. And he's been letting like the servants pamper him and stuff, which his servants are slaves that were given to him by the Dothraki, who live in Dothrak, who do take slaves. But the free city doesn't have slaves, so it's like he smuggled in slaves or whatever. But that's kind of who we're dealing with. And you know, the brother, of course, is just getting his own ego stroked. He's like, oh, well, he knows when I'm king, this will all pay back, because her brother is hardcore obsessed. He's just like, he still calls Westeros our land, and he just goes on these tirades. Like, the dude's only 21. He's a little 21-year-old, and he's like, and that's our land, and they fear the dragon, and I'm gonna beat them all up, and I'm gonna take our land back, and everybody's gonna whatever, you know, like, just the whole time he's like single-minded, cruel. He's like a little skinny, gaunt kid. He wears his hair like pulled back, just full edgelord, you know, like no, I'm the dragon. Do you? That's kind of how I heard him in my head. He's like, do you want to wake the dragon? You know, like, and like, poor little Daenerys, she's like 13. So even though he's like someone anyone could bitch smack away, except a little 13-year-old girl, he happens to have one to pick on. Anyway, that's my impression of him, and boy, do I hate that guy. Anyway, so Daenerys is like, whatever, and he's like telling her like oh, you gotta look womanly and sexy and stuff, and to the point where he actually like full on gives her like a titty twister and like you know, and stuff, and he's like, don't disappoint me, you have to look sexy, you know, and like, oh, sorry, this is a hard chapter, you know, and like, she's sitting there, like, just hurting, like, capitulating and stuff. But see, like, Dany's not, like, stupid. Like, she's out there in the streets listening to people and stuff. Like, she knows that people are, like, calling him the beggar king because they had to sell off all their possessions to get by and stuff. And she knows, like, they talk about Illyrio, the magister, like, that he would, like, sell his best friend for the right price and stuff. So, like, she's super sus, and there's this one moment where, like, he goes off on his little tangent and stuff, because that's what he keeps doing, is he throws these fits, and then he tries to act nice and talk about, like, how nice the future's gonna be when everything's whatever, but in the meantime, he's just grinding her to nothing, you know, instead of, like, alternating, because he's abusive. So he's like off on some little fantasy about, you know, like, I'm gonna be like Rhaegar and fight for love in the Battle of the Trident or whatever, you know, like some historical thing. I'm pretty sure it was Rhaegar. If it wasn't Rhaegar in the Battle of the Trident, I'm sorry. Okay, there was a lot of info. But meanwhile, it's kind of getting revealed that they're gussying her up to try to look pretty and like a grown woman, and he's like, you can't stand like that, you gotta like stick your chest out and pop the girls and blah blah blah, and like picking her apart. Meanwhile, these slaves come in, right? And poor little Daenerys, she's just like hearing street kids play in the street, and she's just wishing, you know, she was like a little homeless orphan instead of this stuff. And she mentions like there's this call, and I guess calls are kind of like kings or whatever, but there's like this horse warrior guys in Dothrak, the Dothraki, and they're huge, like think like Huns, you know, but they're giant, like kind of barbarian guys. They ride horses a lot, and they will mess somebody up, and there are hundreds of thousands of them, you know, like just tons of barbarians running around. Anyway, I guess she has to go meet this call, and they are trying to basically auction her off to this guy and sell for an alliance, more or less. And you know, like, there's this old slave, she don't say too much, and then there's this younger slave who they say is his favorite, you know, the magisters. And she talks a lot. So like they're like washing this poor little girl and stuff, and the whole time the little slave who's like 16, she's like, he's got so much money, girl, and he's handsome, and he's got this big army, and he like think like you know that song, like, no one fights like Gaston. Like basically she's like he's got 200 houses, you know, he's a demon archer and stuff. Like, he's such a good man. All his slaves, like, their collars are gold and stuff, you know what I mean? Like, and she's just going off Meanwhile, they go and like they kind of descriptively perfume her naughty parts and stuff. So we're gonna skip past that just for sanity and stuff. Think of Emilia Clarke. Emilia Clarke will save you. Anyway, and like once they perfume her up and stuff, they start dressing her and she's in her little thing, and they put like these little bracelets on her that are like amethyst and pretty nice, and then they put this gold collar on with like all these old Valerian symbols and stuff, and all she can think, this poor little scared 13-year-old girl, is like, even his slaves have gold collars. So she's shook, man. And you know, her brother is like off, so when she walks out, he's like, oh yeah, you look okay, you know, like, and he's like, but you gotta stand better and look more womanly. And meanwhile, like, this other greasy magister, you know, he's like walking in like, you know, and he's like, you look very regal, da da da, right? And the brother like starts going off on a thing, and he's like, well, these Dothraki, who knows, like, they're out there banging sheep and stuff. And you know, the merchant's just like, I wouldn't say that around them. And he's like, takes it super personal, gets his little ego hurt, and he's like, do you think I'm an idiot? Blah 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 blah. So like the greasy magister, who's also in cahoots, like trying to move him off, starts playing him again, and he's like, oh no, blah blah blah, like they will see the strength of the dragon and all that. And this dude, like, he's so single-minded up his own butt. Like, he just falls for it again and goes off in a little flight of fancy about how he's gonna be like the best warrior ever and take back the throne. I really hope a horse kicks him right in his face. I really do. Like, no spoilers if it happens. Just I am team kick Viserys in the face with the horse. Okay, so anyway, he's like, just everything about him makes me want to just grab his head, just shove it against the wall. Anyway, and I'm not a violent person. I'm a man of peace. But anyway, so some dudes show up and they start riding in, and Viserys, of course, is being like a little edgelord, and he's got his little hand on his sword, pretending like he knows how to use it and stuff. He's like, and so, because I guess the guy who showed up, there's these mercenaries, and they're called Unsullies, and I guess they're eunuchs and stuff. But you know, he's got like copper skin, like a Dothraki, because I guess most of them are like copper colored, or they said like brown red, so I'm guessing just copper. But they're darker skinned, and he's wearing like this like spiked brass helmet, and I guess that's what lets you know they're an Unsullied, and they're like kind of badass mercenaries. And the dude's like, he's getting kind of you know, about it, Viserys is. And again, you know, Iliara the Magister, he's like playing his ego, and he's like, oh, well, we need them because we got to protect all the guests, especially you, because you're the dragon. You're the true king of Westeros. And, like, again, you know, they kind of cut to, you know, the actual festival and the meeting and stuff. And, like, when they walk in, like, that's how they announce them. You know, it's like Viserys, the true king of Westeros, the guardian of the realm, and like a bunch of other honorifics and stuff. And they do the same for Dany. Like, they're like, Daenerys Stormborn, the blah 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 blah, you know, and like trying to make them out to be whatever. And she's all like prettied up and stuff. And the merchant, well, the magister, he's like, oh, I gotta go mingle, you know, and stuff. But like, first he's pointing out a couple of people to Dany, and he's like, yo, those are Cal's blood riders over there. They're pretty badass, you know. And they're like, yeah, that dude is like an emissary from wherever, you know. Sorry, there was a lot of names again. and stuff, and they point out the one like super dark guy, you know, and it's like, and that guy is from the Summer Isles because he has skin of like onyx, so I'm guessing like he's like one of those midnight black guys. And you know, she's like 13, she's like a girl, and she's standing there, and like this party is just failing the vibe check. She's like, I am the only girl here. All these giant dudes are walking around, because Dothraki, they have like really long braids with like bells in them and stuff, and then they have like these long ringed, you know, hanging mustaches. And I guess like the longer your braid, the badder you are, because they cut your braid off if you lose combat. So they're sitting there, and she's looking through, and she's like, "This is sus, dude. I just want to go," you know. And her brother, like that little piece of crap, gets up on her, and he's like, you know, you gotta whatever, and he like points out Call, you know, and stuff, and he's like, that's Call. And you look at Call, and this dude is giant compared to like even the big guys, and he's got like this jet black super long braid all the way down to like his thighs, because he's never lost a fight, and he's telling her that, and he's got like this cruel face, and he's just this big giant guy. And you know, Daenerys, she's 13-year-old girl. She's just like, I can't, I don't want to be his queen. I just want to go home. And her brother, of course, instantly makes it about her. And he's like, how are we gonna go home? Blah blah blah. We don't have a home, you know, because the whole time like Daenerys is just missing like that house, you know, like on Bravos with the red door and the lemon tree and stuff. You know, like she's a kid still. And Viserys is like, blah blah blah, like I'm gonna give you to that cow and stuff, because it's important to note, like Dany in her head thought she was gonna marry her brother, because I guess the Targaryens, like they get down like that, like they're like, no, all the other blood is impure, we only breed with each other. And you know, there's Aegon the Conqueror, he married his sisters, so like everybody was just like, okay, brothers and sisters, that's how we go, you know. So she was thinking that the whole time, and then all of a sudden her little edgelord brother is like, I'm gonna sell you to a Dothraki, you know. So, and she has a moment, and he just really shows his butt on it, because he's like, look, I would give you to him and everyone he commands and their horses if it means I'll get my army to go home. Because that's it, like even when they're riding up, you know, he's like I don't need his whole horde. I just need like 10,000. And then if I had 10,000 Dothraki screamers, I could just steamroll the whole place. You know, like he's in his head, like flights of fancy, playing with his sword, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be a conqueror, and full on screwing his sister over. So basically, he's like all that, and makes her cry, telling her all that, breaking her down. And then he's like, wipe your tears, he's coming, I'm not letting him see you crying. And like, as this giant dude starts walking up, then like you know, she like straightens up or whatever, and that's where the chapter ends. Like, I don't know, man, like, oh, there's like 3 people in there I just think immediately need to die. and then one poor 13-year-old girl. But that was hard. I mean, I got warned it might be a little triggering and stuff, so I was, you know, like I was prepared a little bit, but that was rough. And I think it was intentionally uncomfortable, like it's supposed to make her really sympathetic, but it absolutely does. So I don't know, save Dany. All right. This is Tory Torrential. I love you.
Thanks for watching my show. Like and subscribe.